So, you may have been following the news recently, and you may have heard of what's going on in South Africa. That there are massive looting events going on, seemingly connected with the imprisonment of the country's former president. And what I'm interested in, seeing all the footage coming out, seeing all the images and the videos coming out in South Africa.
This is Ian Wilds on fire. The roof officially has exploded. Everything inside is exploding. The guys came back and lit more cars on fire in the front. It's just hectic. The whole building is just on fire.
Is not the destruction of property necessarily, although that in itself is astounding, but more so it's the role of the South African Indian community. And the Indians in South Africa are a minoritarian group. They are not, have not, and will never be a majority in South Africa. They don't especially have any regions, large swaths of land that they own, but rather they exist scattered throughout in small neighborhoods and communities in South Africa.
Indians, stop what you are doing in Phoenix. Okay? Stop killing black people. Because what you're doing is going to have consequences. So what you're doing now in Phoenix, killing black people like that, you're slaughtering them. It's going to cause a problem for all the Indians. Even the Indians in Mobeni, in Chaswet, you're going to cause a very big problem for them. Because when everything settles down, you will have a problem with us. Why are you killing black people like dogs? Please, I'm urging, stop what you're doing, or you will have a very big problem. A very big problem.
And they have been targeted in South Africa for looting because they have done relatively well for themselves in South Africa. And I was thinking today about the situation, about the destiny of this minoritarian group. I was thinking about their future. I was thinking about what sort of strategies they should employ. What's next? Do they simply leave South Africa?
I'm at Konubia currently. It's an area just north of Durban. This is where a chemical plant has been set alight. My colleague Pilani Zuma behind the camera showing you the major part of the building. Let's walk closer. Is completely engulfed in flames. I've been speaking to some of the officers on the ground, and they tell me that this happened last night where looters managed to make their way into these fences. You can see part of the fence broken here actually, and another part of the fence elsewhere broken down. They managed to make their way through and set a chemical plant on fire.
Do they go on for greener pastures, and what lessons can be learned here? And what things can be avoided in the future? With regard to the situation in South Africa, I believe that it is not as spontaneous as it appears. From what I can see and what I believe, the police in South Africa are incredibly corrupt, and they are aiding, abetting, sympathizing with, and helping the looters. They are even, in some cases, caught on camera participating in the looting. Because this looting event you could say is hedonistic in origin, it's jokeresque, it's, you know, the base instincts of the looters, but at the same time, this looting event is political, and there are many policemen with this tribal affiliation, this Zulu tribal affiliation, who sympathize more with the concept of their locked up president than they do with the concept of basic private property rights and law and order and so on and so forth. And so they think they have a right to loot, or at the very least, that they, you know, they might see the perspective of the looters.
No number plates. White Ford Ranger, no number plates. They shooting the Indian guys that are protecting the area. They're driving around, they're shooting. Please, please, please be vigilant. Vigilant. White Ford Ranger, no number plate. They killed 3 Indian males at Clayfield now, by the mosque.
The latest report from the Intelligence Bureau is that they're going to start targeting the Indians in Durban, Phoenix and Chatsworth tonight around 12. They're waiting for it to be dark, and then they're going to start attacking Indians. So please warn whoever you know in Durban, tell them to be alert.
This is a problem. This is a problem for Indian South Africans who are having to deal with this. And so, from my perspective, the international Indian community needs to get involved in South African politics. We know that China is involved in South African politics, and I believe that China has an interest in the looting that's currently going on. And the reason for that is that the Indian community of South Africa is very anti-Chinese on an international scale. India and China are not in close cooperation. They have continual border clashes. They are very different culturally. The Chinese system is, well, it's a materialistic empire. There's no concept of the afterlife. There's no concept of reincarnation, at least explicitly in the day-to-day life of what the average Chinese person believes. Not to say that in traditional folk Confucianism or Buddhism in China that there haven't been concepts of reincarnation, but the average Chinese person is a secular materialist. The average Indian person is very religious. I mean, there's 10% of the population is Muslim. You have a huge swath of the population that is Hindu, but of course Hinduism is not a single codified faith, but it is a conglomeration of variously aligned and mutually congruous spiritual traditions that have in common certain sacred texts such as the Rig Veda, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Gitas at large. And then you have another segment of the population which is devoutly Christian. And so India is a deeply religious country with extremely ancient roots in traditions that are related to European pagan faiths.
Shooting, all the looters are shooting at our house. Please, the house is being shot at 23 Kampa close to Park, Phoenix.
Hi to all the prayer warriors. Please pray for Palmview, for Sastry Park coming towards Woodview. The guys are going into the houses and shooting right now. The mayor said take out the barriers and now they're coming into our homes. Please pray, everybody, in Jesus' name, that this stop and that our family and everybody will be safe. Please be alert, guys. This is now. I'm not joking. I'm warning from Woodview. My husband is gone down to the entrance of Woodview, Palmview, and Sastry Park is very bad at the moment. Please, guys, pray in Jesus' name. The stops. Please, everyone be alert. Lock up and go into their houses now. In Jesus' name, pray that it stops.
If you look back at the Yamnaya expansion, you're going to see that characters such as Krishna and Kalki and Zeus and Odin and all of these characters, these archetypes, are not just coincidentally similar, but they etymologically, ancestrally, and so on, are related through a study of comparative religion. This is I think, the best reasonable hypothesis. And so India has a reason to be aligned generally with the West on a spiritual basis. On a social basis, India is very diverse. India is not a homogeneous Han Chinese population. It's made up of a caste system with many different ethnicities and sub-ethnicities. And so India is very diverse. And I hope I'm not going to get a copyright claim because they're blasting the music over here. I'm not saying it's bad music, I'm just saying YouTube doesn't like that. YouTube doesn't like it when you play cornhole in the park. This is a serious subject. We don't have time for Brendan Urie. We don't have time for this post-pop punk Brendan Urie. In any case, this is too upbeat for the subject at hand. I'm talking about something serious. I'm talking about the Indian religious tradition. In any case, sociologically, religiously, even economically, the Indian economy is more similar to that of the West. So India has many reasons that it's aligned with the West on a number of issues. If you look at the Israeli-Palestinian issue, India tends to be aligned with Israel, partially because of Pakistan. Pakistan is more aligned with Palestine. India and Pakistan have a huge feud. The Chinese tend to take the side of Pakistan. They tend to take the side of Palestine, at least relatively speaking, to the Indians. And so the Indians and the Chinese have many conflicts. And China, with respect to South Africa, wants to break it down, completely break down the South African social model, economic model, political model. It wants to turn South Africa to a morass, a power vacuum, which, you know, are we seeing civil war in South Africa? I don't even know if you can hear me, so we're gonna get a little bit intimate. We're gonna get a little bit closer. I think I've stumbled into a community event, as they call it. I'm lost. I don't belong in this neighborhood. But in any case, China's trying to dissolve the social, political, and economic order of South Africa so that China can sweep in and take over. China would be happy to have historically important naval ports in the south of Africa. It would be happy to have that economic influence in what was previously the largest economic zone. I mean, in the future, the projections are that Nigeria is going to overtake South Africa at some point because of fertility rate. It's not to say that there aren't Christians in South Africa, but Nigeria seems to have a much stronger religious tradition, partially because what is going on over here? What am I listening to? I'm very distracted by this. This is Chinese cultural interception. They're trying to confuse my mind. They're trying to distract from the message at hand. Okay, point is, the Chinese are trying to dissolve South African society. They want to take it over. And so for Indians, what are they to do? What are you to do? If you are an Indian South African, what is your interest? What's your strategy? What's the minoritarian strategy for Indians in South Africa? I'm gonna say that they're gonna recognize that China is moving in, that China is the principal cause of, yeah, I'll let them go by. China is the principal cause of so much of the social dissolution, and that is not good for the established Indians of South Africa. And the Chinese, as they move into South Africa, they're going to want to eliminate competing minoritarian groups because the Chinese will act as a minoritarian group within South Africa. They will be captains of industry, they will be running business, they'll be running diamond mines, They'll move their army, their military will be in South Africa, they'll have military bases in South Africa, and they don't want Indian South Africans who have a long and powerful tradition of minoritarianism as competitors. And so they're going to try to eliminate the Indians in a high-low versus the middle strategy. That's what we're seeing. That's what this looting is fundamentally all about. Now you can say, well, specifically it's about the president, or it's about some kind of specific ignition point, some kind of specific spark, set it off. But in general, I'm going to say that the entire stack of dominoes which led to this series of events is fundamentally something that's instigated by the Chinese and those who are aligned with the Chinese.
So my admonition to the South Africans is this: if you don't put that country back together again, just give it back to the Boers, because you're fooling around. You're messing around with a country. You guys messed up a perfectly good country. Let's just put it that way. South Africa today is a figment of what it used to be. It is a shadow of what it used to be. And you guys are messing it up. So here's the thing. If you South Africans cannot put your act or get your act together, just give it back to the Boers. Let them take it back and bring some semblance of order and respect for the law. If you can't do that, then I'm sorry, South Africa. You're in trouble.
Those who are essentially opposed to a more Western style of spirituality, more Western style of governance, who see the Chinese as an ally in deconstructing and dissolving Western social orders in order to usher in a more Chinese style of governance, which many of the so-called present Western elites see a benefit in, because they do not like the inefficiencies of Western capitalism, of Christianity. They don't like these things. They view these things as threatening. They view these things as old hat and archaic. So they're fans. And let me see if I can adjust this a little bit more so that it's, because I noticed it's thumping around every time I walk. Anyway, so what I would say is that this is the situation the Indian South Africans find themselves in, and what they should do if they want to maintain their position in South Africa, if they don't want to simply flee to India, if they don't want to simply flee to the West, and I'm saying that in the sense that South Africa is really no longer the West. It's sort of the third world, right? It's between the Chinese allied bloc and the Western allied bloc, which is confusing because internally within Western politics you have a pro, or you could say anti-Chinese and pro-Chinese blocs. So the Indians should recognize this and try to recruit internationally political assistance from factions that are sympathetic from them. That would be one thing to do. The other thing that they could do is they could recognize that perhaps this isn't going to work. Perhaps despite the logic of what I'm saying, or the commonsensicality of it, that, well, of course, this is the way that things should be done. The other option for these Indian South Africans is they can see where the wind is blowing, they can see where the currents are taking them, and they can say, it seems like the West doesn't want to help us. This is the situation that previous African societies which were politically dissolved, such as Rhodesia, such as South Africa itself, such as any of the post-colonial projects, these were creations, these were children of Western Empire, the British Empire, the French Empire, the Portuguese, and so on. And yet the West did not help them, the West did not aid them, and it seemed that the West was hurting them more than they were helping them. And so the Indians of South Africa can say, well, it would be logical, it would be reasonable to expect some kind of help from Western intelligence agencies, from India itself. But barring that, if that's not going to happen, if that's a fool's hope, then perhaps we should simply see where the wind is blowing, and we should just say, it's time to break bread with the Chinese. It's time to say to the Chinese, look, we can see that you're moving in. We can see that you are part of a process. You're at least not stopping the process. I mean, is China pulling the strings behind this whole thing? Not necessarily. I'm not saying that Chinese agents on the ground are starting riots. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I'm saying is that the West has basically withdrawn from South Africa politically to exploit it economically, and that China is essentially doing the same thing. It's in a very withdrawn position. So through inaction, what I'm suggesting is that these parties are just as guilty through their inaction as they would be through their action. It's an important thing to understand that when you have these armies that are 1 million men strong that can be deployed internationally, if they're not deployed, it's the same thing as if I saw someone being attacked on the street and I had, you know, a gang of 10 men or 100 men, and I did nothing to help people who were being robbed. You know, that is the appropriate metaphor that we have to understand, that international powers, when they withhold assistance in these cases, they are not being, they're not powerless to do something. They're actively making a choice to ignore and therefore to exacerbate the situation. That's what I say when I implicate these parties, not to say that they are actively facilitating the chaos going on. But what I'll say about the alternative to the first option here is that the Indians of South Africa can go to the Chinese and say, look, no one's coming to help us, no one's coming to save us. We know that you want to move into South Africa. We know that you have ambitions to do that, and we can help you do that, but you need to help us. You need to step in, you need to put troops on the ground, you need to do something to help us, to protect us, because the chaos, the lack of law and order is crippling our communities. It's threatening our existence on this continent, and many people are going to choose to emigrate. Many people are going to choose to leave if something is not done, because people feel hopeless, they feel defenseless, they feel like they have millions and millions of looters at their door, destroying all of their hard work, coming for their lives, coming for their wives and children. And so many of them are going to choose to leave. And if they don't want that to happen, that's, I guess, the first option. First option is to leave. The second option is to appeal to what would seem to be the commonsensical ally in the West, but understanding that the West is internally divided with its own high-low versus the middle strategy, you would appeal directly to the Chinese and you would say, well, strange times make strange bedfellows, and China, we understand that you are our geopolitical rival internationally, but maybe we can cut a deal. Maybe we can have something akin to the Iran-Contra scandal, where two parties that would traditionally be enemies can temporarily be allies for the purpose of basic survival in this situation. So these are the options that are laid out for the Indians of South Africa. I think I would need more information. I'm not on the ground. I don't know a lot of people in South Africa. I can observe certain things. I can take in certain data points, but I'm not within these communities and I can't tell them ultimately what to do. But to outsiders who have not heard of the situation, I believe this is the scope of the matter. And I think basically all options have to be kept on the table, because I think that simply leaving South Africa, while it is attractive in the short term, is ultimately, I don't think that it's a long-term winning strategy. I don't think it's ultimately, if every time you encounter resistance, you simply leave, you simply give up, you simply run away to greener pastures, then you're never going to be holding on to any territory or any influence. There are times when you need to stand and defend yourself, and this may be one of those times. And again, I can't predict that, I can't prove that for certain, But that is my instinctual feeling, is that there should be an appeal to the West saying, look, you know, there needs to be some teeth to this. It can't simply be, oh, please help us, end of story. It should be, you better help us, because if you don't, we're going to the Chinese. And if we go to the Chinese, well, we're going to strengthen China's position in South Africa. And if you don't want that to happen, you should probably help us restore law and order. And the same thing to the Chinese, say, look, you better help us, or else we're going to strengthen the West's position. We're going to help the West. This is the kind of international diplomacy that these Indians of South Africa need to be engaged with through proxies back in India through Prime Minister Modi. Should be internationally, and I hope he is on their behalf, internationally organizing, internationally trying to come to an agreement where the chaos can stop or be limited to certain areas. If that we're going to have this chaos, it needs to be understood that there are zones where you can loot and there are zones where you cannot loot. Those are my thoughts on the crisis of the Indian minoritarians of South Africa. I hope you've enjoyed or learned something, and if you did, please take time to follow me on Twitter at Jockle, Jokkull. That's Deep Left Jockle on Twitter. You can also like, share, subscribe. Till next time, take care. Bye-bye.